Morning all, Dominic Grace, Savills. I'm not selling anything today, fear not. Paul and the guys asked me to give a sort of agent's overview, much of which will chime with what Melanie said, because actually a lot of the clients that I work for Savills, represent are that same cadre that are members of Melanie's BPF organisation. Actually, quick hands up. Who is effectively a seller in here? Who's got something they want to sell into that sector? Okay. So I'm guessing the others could be prospective buyers, i.e. you could be recipients of services. Let's have hands up if you consider yourself in that boat, if you're a prospective buyer. Okay, we've got some people who are sort of neither, which is fine for whatever reason. Good. Very quick bit about Savills, because I think when I stand up in an audience like this, most of the time I stand up in front of an audience that has a pretty good grip of what we do, but we don't just sell the old rectory outside Winchester. That is part of our business, but we are very much an international business, and we are totally multidisciplinary. We don't just do residential, we have a massive commercial business. We were one of the first entrants within our world into China. We now have 15 offices in mainland China, just for starters. We have a much bigger turnover now abroad than we do in the UK. That's not to say our UK business hasn't grown enormously. It has. We've got 6,000 odd people in 130 offices doing lots of different things. So we have a lot of exposure to residential, commercial, rural. Chatted a bit about Melanie comes from a food background. All these things are sort of intertwined these days, aren't they? Well, an observation is where sort of, if you like, talking on behalf of the whole industry, certainly from an agent's perspective, there's not just a lot of noise around proptech. It is a total, complete and utter cacophony. So with my PA yesterday, I just said, let's just Google a few images for proptech. So what do you know, this came up for Germany. You won't be able to see all these names, but it gives you some idea. This came up for Spain. And this came up for the UK. We all know there's a hell of a lot of start-up small things buzzing around like a sort of almost a plague of locusts, if one was a bit cynical about it, looking to prey on the property sector, and understandably, because it is enormous. And I would disagree with Melanie when she said she didn't think the property sector were the sort of most Luddite. I would say we are. In certain areas, particularly construction industry, we literally, in some cases, are back in the Stone Age still. Another observation that people often make is around that huge sort of plague is that there are lots of solutions being dreamt up for problems, as it were, that don't exist, or perhaps that the prospective buyer don't perceive really exist. Now, there are many dinosaurs. Melanie alluded to that. She said that there are some CEOs who are quite progressive out there. One can't generalize, but overall, there are a lot of dinosaurs, and tragically, they're T-Rexes. They're the alpha predator still out there. Some of them are clever enough to look up in the sky and think, there's a little speck that, do you know what, it's got a bit bigger since I saw that an hour or so ago. That might just be a meteorite that might just hit the Yucatan Peninsula, might wipe us out. There are a few out there, or I'm being a bit melodramatic there, who recognize perhaps that we're going from, and I'll get my periods wrong here, between the Jurassic and Triassic, or you get the point. There were an evolution periods when there was an extraordinary sort of explosion of flora, fauna, or whatever. I think we're in one of those points now. So it's happening pretty quickly. And the question is, who's going to win, as it were? We're in an interesting time in the UK market, certainly when it comes to residential. A bit of background about me. I head Savills London residential development team. So we represent a lot of landowners, developers active in London and indeed elsewhere across the UK. You'll know that the residential market is having a bit of a bad time now. So a lot of the sort of new whiz-bang things that might help these businesses, they're thinking, well, do you know what, times are a bit tough at the moment. I'm not sure it's the time to be taking the risk, because that's the way they still view it, to invest in these new whiz-bang things. I have to say, the collaboration piece I was going to mention anyway, and I totally recognize the need for that to happen. And quite how you guys get together, there's a lot of noise out there, there are lots of conferences. I'd really welcome people to chat about how they could work together, because I sort of see it a bit like the Wimbledon Championships, and we're still in the qualifying rounds happening in some nether part of London or elsewhere around the UK before people even get into those championships. But ultimately, we will end up with, the quarterfinals, the semi-finals. It certainly happened with the Resi property portals, didn't it? Lots of startups, and we've ended up with 2, maybe 3 players in that space. So the question is, who do you jump into bed with to make it work? Because right now, there are too many apps, too many systems for the system to get on board with. So who's going to be the winner, having that base platform that everyone can play on? There are some already out there. There was mention of BIM earlier. I think that's a really exciting opportunity for people to get in and make sure whatever they're doing works with systems like Revit, because they've already got a pretty good grip in the sort of base system of it all. A lot of it also, there's a sort of ooh-ah piece that it's very easy to say, isn't that great? But it's slightly like watching a YouTube video. It's a quick fix, and then you move on to the next one. Already had some reference earlier about value. What is the value? And coming back to those dinosaurs, T-Rexes, they've got to recognize very quickly how whatever it is one's selling affects their bottom line pretty soon as well. Because sadly, a lot of these people do work on an annual sort of P&L basis, and they need to see that benefit very, very quickly. A lot of you may know this quote. I think it's a really powerful one, and I think we're absolutely at a point where this is so relevant. The challenge for all of us is, what do we do about it? It's a bit of a sort of sucker punch, this, because everyone gets it, but what does it mean next? And do you know what? I don't know. I'm not clever enough to say, but I do think, and it comes back to that evolutionary thing, we're at that point now, that tipping point. I might move on, actually, one slide. So what have Savills been doing? We are agents. We manage millions of square feet around the world. We transact a lot of stuff. We do a lot of advisory work. Are we sitting there just sort of seeing what happens? In some respects, yes, because we don't know. We have a team of people that are out there spotting both the threats and opportunities to our business in the space. Yopa, which started life as your online property agent, is now the second largest online agent in the UK, trying to snap at the heels of Purple Bricks. It's actually, by listings, the 8th largest estate agency business in the UK, and that's on the back of an investment. We don't own it all, but we own a significant chunk of that we made in 2016. Now that's quite interesting. You won't be able to read this, but those at the back says, so what it's given us is exposure to mass market through business model and asymmetrical hedge against hybrid agents taking market share. I think that means we basically put some chips on what might happen, because we have a big estate agency business. So successfully so far, we've hedged some bets in that space. View City is a 3D modeling business, and I'm going to take a punt here with the IT. So if we can go on to the next slide, or Darren, can you launch it? Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Quick overview. It's not running as smooth as it might. So View City is a business that has modeled all of London, and is modeling, and has already modeled other cities around the UK, and has plans to go global. And what that model allows one to do, because it is hyper accurate, it is accurate within 15 centimeters. You, as an architect, or particularly as a planning authority, when a model imported from CAD sits in that 3D world, you know that it is accurate. And that's significant, and they've already rolled it out very successfully amongst London boroughs, and increasingly developers will be told, crudely, that they must put their model into that their CAD drawings into the 3D model, so that the local authority, and key point, slightly alluding again to a point Melanie made about public involvement now in the development process, crowdsourcing. Developers used to play a game when, let's say, it came to creation of a CGI for their new scheme. They'd sit down with these CGI creators and say, right, let's have this view because it doesn't show the overshadowing there, let's do that, it doesn't show this. Henceforth, developers are going to be completely open about what their scheme will be like, the impact on the locals, etc. So work there, another investment we made. This was a startup from within Savills. Within Savills, we have a Dragon's Den set up. And one of our scarily young graduates, he was only about a year, 18 months into his career, had this idea, witnessing what was going on out there in the co-working space, the WeWorks and all those guys. He said there's an opportunity here to be the sort of aggregator site for those businesses. Fantastic. Only started up a couple of years ago, over £1 million turnover for Savills already. And we've opened that in London, Berlin, Dublin, and going global with that. iCondo is a business I know less about, but that was built up or invested in by via our Singapore office, and that is, again, one of those community apps. We've already heard a bit about that this morning, particularly focused on the Singapore market, but with plans to go sort of roll that out in Asia. And it's that sort of impartial interface between the landlord and the tenant. So we're doing things out there, and we're constantly scanning the horizon to see what's going on out there. Now, rather messy slide this, chat a bit about sort of my world day-to-day development. We all know housing shortage in the UK, and we've probably heard quite a bit about the painful process of how long it takes to conceive, get planning. Melanie talked a bit about that earlier. Very painful still. And then actually get built and delivered. I put here, let's say, a 500-unit project built in 2 phases. Right now, you buy a site, you assemble your team, you work up many iterations, architects go away, come back, we get a lot of project meetings. All this takes many months, straight years, and eventually, and painfully, you get planning consent, then off you go, building groundworks, phase 1 starts, etc. You all would have heard a lot about the sort of need for MMC, modern methods of construction, to roll out in the UK. Well, what we will see, and this hardly news to some of you, is that soon, quite when one doesn't know, is that the huge truncation of the sort of conceptual visualizing of a project, that 3D world we talked about, engagement with the general public, engagement with the planners, this is where government can definitely help. And then, if we can get our act together, and key point, the guys that build it are working right from the off. So the linear process of working up a scheme, get to REBA stage, whatever, then get a contractor in who says, oh, why have you designed it that way? That's going to cost you a lot of money, it'll take a lot longer. Those days need to end, and slicker management moving forward. So pretty soon, there's going to be a platform where everything, and let's not forget the marketing piece, happens on one platform. It's designed, conceived, presented to the general public, built, marketed, and then managed on one platform. That is the opportunity. And do you know what? I monitor this very closely. All the bits of it to do that are out there. What do you know? It needs some collaboration to make it all happen. Anyway, I probably banged on for too long, over and out. Thank you. Dominic Grace. Sadly, I can't hang around for too much longer. Sorry, sticky throat. Love to hear from anyone. That's my email address. We're right up for engaging with whomever out there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dominic.
Do you want to have
Dominic. Thanks, Dominic. That's fantastic. Any quick-fire questions? Yeah, one from towards the front before Dominic leaves.
Sorry, any questions? Sorry, did you have your hand up? You did. Yes. Are you waiting for a mic? Sorry.
Thanks, Dominic. I'd be interested in your perspective about residential, because traditionally property has always been commercial and residential, and there are schemes out there that blend the two. If we believe some of our earlier speakers, half Canary Wharf is unoccupied. Why don't we turn it into flats for key workers and things like that? Why do we not blend commercial and residential a bit more?
Well, we do. I mean, mixed-use development's been out there, certainly talked about for a long time. There are very few developers who are good at it, I grant you that. Historically, you've had, well, in the mainstream house building, you've had the house builders who, let me tell you, are the brontosauruses of the dinosaur world. Very, very, very slow moving, but very, very significant. They deliver, I forget the exact stat, but something like 80% of the housing is delivered by the top 8 house builders. So, very, very entrenched way of going to do things. Now, I mentioned the tough market. They haven't had to evolve because from an evolutionary point of view, there wasn't the need. They were getting away with it, and they were getting away with murder when it comes to that customer piece. And look, we've all seen documentaries, read articles, probably had first-hand experience or friends had who bought a new home, and it's been absolutely shite. But you know what? The market's gone up. Developer, the whole snagging process nightmare. Well, we're at a tipping point now where increasingly in the tech and the design will allow a savvy developer to do it properly and start winning. And I'm really looking forward to the emergence of the new players who might be Google. I mean, they've already talked about getting into the development space. So there are going to be some new left field entrances. Canary Wharf isn't all empty, by the way, but there's a lot of flats being built there, perhaps not at the right price points, I grant you. And look, I'm not here to chat about how we crack the housing problem, but technology's definitely got its part to play. Any more?
What's next on after the, was it 4 examples of the investments that you put up?
Yeah, that is an extensive list. That just give you a bit of a sort of selection and show that we're doing it internationally and commercially and residentially as well. Look, we are like JLL and others and CBREs, we already had reference to Cushman's, all the big firms are sort of aware of the need to sort of embrace technology it's very interesting what's going on out there. In fact, someone told me the other day that JLL now increasingly present themselves as a tech company. They're trying to really get rid of the sort of conventional agent surveyor profile. We'll see if that works.
Okay. One final question from anybody? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, one right at the end. Right at the end.
We hear a lot about sort of from the proptech side, why people don't buy and how legacy and sort of slow the industry is. What could we do better to actually articulate the value of our solutions to you guys?
Yeah, well, I said it earlier, you said it, others have said it earlier. Richard, the guy from Czech Republic, said value. Observations, I'm not having a pop at anyone. I think it's very important when you're pitching your wares for those that are selling, you've got to very quickly get down to the value proposition. And because I mentioned earlier, there's also like ooh-ah thing, which look, it's great, but you've got to, everyone's hard-nosed about it when push comes to shove. And therefore, being able to demonstrate very meaningfully, incredibly, where the value proposition is important.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay.
Great fun.
Thanks,
Dominic. Cheers.